So, Gabs, I've been following your case for a number of months now. You actually have a court case in Nevada that has to do with your son being in school. In the court documents, there's a figure, there's an image of a sponge with a rainbow, and the words "reverse racism doesn't exist" are pictured there. And your son had something to say about that, and he got some pushback. Tell me a little bit about this.
That meme was what really kind of started this for him, for William. When that was brought up in his classroom, he just politely said, anybody can be racist. That was his first time pushing back on, anything like this. And when that happened, there was heated debate and discussion about it. And at which time, the teacher decided to close the chat because they were in distance learning. First of all, saying something like that in a classroom is completely and utterly ridiculous. Racism is prejudice based on race, and anybody can be racist. So this whole idea of, reverse racism doesn't exist. In a lot of ways, I say, yeah, you know what? It's just plain old racist. We don't need to keep on creating words and, changing words and trying to deflect attention from the actual definition of words. It's all racism. I don't care who it's against. If you're basing your prejudice based on the race of a white person, that's racist. If you're basing a prejudice on the race of a black person, that's prejudice too. We don't need to keep with this parallel language messaging. That's what I call it. This parallel language messaging introduced into our K through 12 schools, where the words don't mean what they used to mean anymore. Now racism is supposed to be power plus prejudice. No. Racism has always meant prejudice based on race. And we don't need to keep changing the definitions. So William, he utilized all the words in his vernacular accurately, just like everybody else should. And he said, no, anybody can be racist. And that is true. And I am very proud of him for making that decision to speak out and not just accept some nonsense.
So in the lawsuit, essentially, your son was basically told that he has to identify himself as an oppressor. Is that right?
Yes. He had to list his identities, and then attach signifiers to them: oppressed, oppressor, privileged, that sort of thing. And they were derogatory. So for my son, as a white male, and several of these other able-bodied, all of those things, then he had to attach oppressor or privileged to those identities. And there were no other options. You just had to attach those. And so all of his identities and how they intersect, he's just an oppressor. No. He wasn't going to do that. And he didn't. And that was before I ever even got involved. He just didn't finish. He just didn't complete that assignment. And he said, no, I'm not doing it. Because who wants to do that? Even if I had to fill out that assignment and I had to say, well, I'm this, 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 and this. I'm X, Y, and Z, so I'm oppressed. I'm not oppressed. I'm an American. I can do whatever I want to do. However I feel like I want to live my life, I can do that. And I can go as far as I want to in my life in America. That's why people come here. So he wasn't going to do that. And I stand behind him on that. And so do his brothers and his sister.
So in these kinds of situations, kids typically, because, the teacher is an authority figure, if they have a different understanding, let's say from the home, which he clearly did, in this case, but if they might not be able to feel like they can respond.
William was born on Martin Luther King Day of the year of his birth. And his middle name is Martin because we decided we wanted to respect the legacy, right? And so my son is going to live up to that legacy. Dr. Martin Luther King told all of us not to judge someone by the color of their skin, but the content of their character. And so my son has been taught to do that his whole life. He was named after that idea and that concept, that legacy, and he's going to continue to do it until he dies.
Gabs, very, very powerful words. But this didn't actually start with your son. You had seen some other materials through this. I guess it's a kind of a silver lining from COVID with the distance learning that parents began to be able to see what some of their kids are learning. You actually first saw some of these this type of messaging with your daughter.
I was getting concerned about my children, like all of us were, because of the pandemic and distance learning. It was a very scary time, not knowing anything about what was going on with the pandemic. And, over the summer, all of these terrible things, everyone in the world watching what happened to George Floyd, which was unbelievably horrific. And I don't care who you are, that was not acceptable. You know what I mean? Once school started again and I started listening to, really overhearing what was going on in my daughter's classrooms, and overhearing some things that I wasn't super excited about. I didn't think that it was appropriate to promote things like Black Lives Matter. Black Lives Matter, they do. All lives matter, they do. But the organization itself, that was something that I did not think was appropriate to be teaching to my middle schooler. All of this graffiti all over the country was being introduced to my middle schooler as art. Graffiti is a crime. Like, why are we trying to teach middle schoolers that this is an acceptable way to express yourself, to go and spray up cars and, all that whole business? That's not acceptable. I don't like to introduce any kind of crime to my middle schooler. They're not ready to take in that information and look at it objectively. They're just children. All they see that it's cool to go spray paint, somebody's car. No, that's not something that I'm ready to teach my middle schooler. I mean, that was the kind of thing I was seeing in her classrooms. And so I started actively listening. And I can't even remember what it was that was said. But when I heard something that was 100% a no-go. And I told her to leave that class, and I found her a new school that very day. And I went to William and asked him if anything like that had been introduced in his course material. He said no, not really knowing that what was going on in her class and what was going on in his class were actually connected. But that's why this is so crazy. These kids don't even know that they're being indoctrinated. They think that the teachers and the administrators in their schools are to be trusted and that they're getting a proper education. And so whenever I asked to see what was in his class, and some of the coursework he left a blank and didn't complete, I knew, and I said to him, there's a reason why you didn't feel comfortable, because this is wrong. This is wrong.
What are the kinds of things that you've seen that, are wrong in your mind?
Well, I mean, first and foremost, the compelled speech aspect of this is unbelievably wrong. School is compelled speech in a lot of ways. They tell you have to tell us what you know. Prove to us you know this. That's kind of where you expect for your child to perform. But when they're asking things like, tell us your race, religion, your gender and sexual identities and your disabilities. That is crossing an unbelievably visible line. There at no point has it ever been okay for most any government entity to ask those kinds of questions for any reason in school or for a job as a requirement for a position or a graduation. Those are the kinds of things that we are Americans and we have the right to say no to.
I mean, it's incredible. A lot of kids might just not be ready to take a stand like that when that's what the expectation is from the teacher.
Well, I can tell you this, that is why No Left Turn is empowering and educating their parents so their parents can go to their communities and eradicate this nonsense. You tell your children, no, I am not going to fill out this form telling you all of my business in my home that goes on in my home. Or no, I'm not going to fill out this form that has me labeling myself as oppressed or labeling myself as privileged. When William had to do that assignment, I had been in a wheelchair for several years and we were living in a motel and William was sleeping on a mat on the floor. His father died when he was 1 year old. He does not have a single memory. So no, he wasn't going to just say, I'm an oppressor. And I taught him that. We raised him that way.